I'm working at Narxoz University. This is in Kazakhstan. We're an applied research institute, so we try to bridge the gap between academic research and actually implementing practical projects on the ground that lead to concrete results. And we have been working for about 4 years now on international projects linked with mine tailing safety. So I think that all of you will find this quite interesting. These are some practical projects that we developed or that we're in the process of implementing that I think can be used as a very low-cost practical solution to some of these mine tailing issues. The first part I will talk about is linked with air pollution, but of course, as you know, air pollution is also linked with water pollution, so it can be very much relevant. And then the second one is a practical project that we're working on now, linked with abandoned tailing mines and how the tailings can actually be addressed through nature-based solutions. So, as you all know, there's this new global industry standard on tailing management, which aims to improve the safety of tailings facilities in the mining industry. And one point I would like to emphasize here on the new global industry standard is the encouragement to integrate both social, economic, as well as environmental aspects into the technical considerations for tailing mine safety standards. Please, next slide. So what I'll be talking to you about are one project that we recently completed and that we're in the process of developing for another mining company, and that's related to air quality. And the second one is related to water waste. And both of these are nature-based, practical nature-based solutions to try to mitigate or remediate environmental pollution deriving from tailings. Next slide. So one of the big problems that we all know in the mining industry is trying to reduce the impact of tailings dust in the process of crushing rocks to extract minerals. There's byproduct of that, and that is all piled up into tailings, as we know. And when the wind blows, this dust, toxic dust, can blow around in the air and create major ecological, also human impacts on the environment and also on human populations that live close to the tailings. The traditional way of suppressing dust is, of course, with sprays. These sprays are usually done to kind of suppress the dust. It's very expensive. It's done either through Bowser system, which is the bottom picture, or the top one, as you can see, which is kind of a mobile spray system. But it's quite costly. It only suppresses the dust for a limited amount of time, so it needs to at least biannual or annual replication of the dust suppression, because these are liquids and it doesn't suppress the dust permanently. It's ineffective in a lot of ways, and it also requires routine maintenance. And these liquids that are sprayed usually contain chlorides, which leach into the road surfaces. They're corrosive to metal, hurt local vegetation growth, and can also damage the chemistry of the nearby soils and also affect aquatic life when these dust suppression chemicals leach into the waterways. Next slide, please. And so we developed a concept. It was originally a research concept, and this was the idea of phyto capture, which seems very simple and self-explanatory, but what it is how can you basically create a barrier system directly adjacent to the tailings in order for the vegetation to capture the dust in the leaf areas of different types of vegetation. So we look at how big the barrier is, how far apart different types of vegetation need to be, what types of vegetation need to be planted, whether it's a mix between trees, shrubs, and grass. And we also have a modeling software that we use called Enviromet. And this modeling software can be used to scientifically analyze different variations of different types of barriers in order to maximize the amount of dust capture which happens from these vegetative barriers. And we also our team works to support the implementation and management of the barrier systems. Please go ahead, next slide. And so we had, after our research, we proved that it was scientifically viable. And so we were able to obtain a commercial contract with a company called Altinamas. Altinamas is one of the largest gold mines in Kazakhstan. They have many operations all over the country, one being gold, and they have a big problem with Aksu gold mine. And the problem with this gold mine in particular is that there's residential village. You can see part of that in the picture. Part of that's mine operations, but also part of that is some small dachas or small summer homes. And there's several other villages that are kind of within the framework of the mining operations or very close, directly adjacent to the mining operations. So there's protests by local population, a lot of uneasiness because of the fact that people are getting sick from this airborne dust. Next slide, please. And so basically we did field visit there with the company. We got air temperature, humidity, took data, wind velocity, wind direction, different types of soil types, composition, emission rates from different particles, particular PM 2.5 because that's the most toxic, but also PM 10. And also what types of obstructions could potentially be in the area, such as, for instance, telephone lines or cables or fencing that could make a problem in actually planting a vegetative barrier there. Next slide. And so basically, here's the modeling steps. We took all this. This can also be done, the research can be done remotely, but actually planting the vegetation barrier can, obviously you have to physically be there to work with the companies, the forestry companies that are doing the planting. But in order to do the modeling, basically you can get a lot of the information from the environmental impact assessment reports that most countries around the world are required to do, saying where the emissions are from, what types of emissions, and to basically identify all of these different point source pollutions. And here you can see in the top screen, this is the tailing that, these are several tailings, but the main tailing we worked on is the big one in the top part of the screen. And we measured and inserted the different types of pollution that is within the tailing. Also the direction of the wind, because that plays a major impact in terms of where you plant the barrier. So if the wind goes from east to west, then it's better to plant the barrier on the west side. If the wind goes from west to east, then it's better to plant the vegetation barrier on the east side. And so all these parameters can be put into this data. Data can be put into the model, and then you visualize it. And unfortunately here, it was a interactive slide. So if you look at the tree in the bottom part, this is like basically a pixel in the model, and then each leaf is basically analyzed along with the stem of the tree and the types of vegetation that would be flowing towards that tree and the degree to which it can capture dust. But unfortunately, because this was it's done centrally with the UNECE, it's no longer a interactive slide. So please be imaginative with what I'm showing you here. Next slide, please. And so here you can see basically after the modeling, this green on the left-hand side of the screen, you see the phyto capture barrier. This is the green part. It was planted 6 meters from the tailing, so it's better to be as close to the tailing as possible. This is because there's some rules and regulations linked with where you can plant vegetation, because it can end up causing structural integrity problems with the tailing itself. Then the middle slide, unfortunately, again, this was interactive, but you can't see it. It shows what it looks like in the model. And so you have these blue, red particles, and they're going towards the this barrier, which we modeled. And there you can see how the pollution flows. This was the right-hand side, and the percentage of capture for these different types of particles. And we proved that PM 2.5 can be reduced up to 35% with the vegetative barrier on the west side of the tailing. Go ahead, next slide. And so basically we then deployed it. So here you can see, of course, the far right-hand corner, you can see the trees. Directly behind it is the tailing. This is just one small part of it, of course. And you need regular maintenance of this vegetation, of course, for it to grow to a specific size where it would be most effective to capture this airborne dust. So it takes about 2 years for it to grow to full capacity, where it will capture 35% of the dust. And also interesting to note is that if you have a very high tailing, so this tailing is low, it's only 2 meters high. If you have a 6 meter high tailing, for example, you can still use the same modeling scenario and process because the dust blows both in two directions, one from the high part of the tailing, so the tall vegetation captures it, and then it also rolls off of the tailing and goes down along the surface of the ground. And then there you can plant a bunch of, let's say, small scale vegetation like grass or shrubs, which can capture that type of vegetation as well, that type of PM as well. Next slide, please. And so why is this useful? Is one, it's very cheap because it's a long-term solution. It can be, 40, 50 years if the plants and vegetation take shape and people routinely maintain them. It's long-term. That's the other thing. It aligns with these international standards of mine tailing safety that I talked with at the beginning, ecologically friendly. The modeling provides scientific evidence that it directly reduces the tailing by specific amount. So it depends on how much money the company has, what types of vegetation can practically be planted there. So for instance, if it's a dry area, you're not going to plant a maple tree. So it's a mix between this theoretical modeling component and practically working with the companies to come up with a practical solution that is suitable for the mining company, because very often there's a disconnect between the scientific component and the practical aspect of it. Also, it provides local people a very nice thing to look at. So it's good for promotion. The company looks good. You can use it in advertising and stuff like that. And also it's effective and it works, and we prove it scientifically that it works. And maybe the final point I want to make on this project is that also many companies are required by law, national legislation, to give a certain percentage of their total profit for beautification projects or for scientific research on mitigation, remediation. So this actually plays very practically in the hands of the company too, because it gives them a practical solution to use. Okay, next slide, please. And this will be shorter, I promise. So because we had success on this, so we took a research project, we commercialized it and sold it to a company. We received funding with the Tau Foundation. They're actually our practical partners as well, Tau engineering firm. So we work with them. Our team is international. It's not just Kazakh. So we work with colleagues from the Netherlands, also from England. And also we have a researcher from Tehran, Iran, which works with us on these projects. And so we wanted to see whether we could apply a similar concept, meaning do research on nature-based solutions, show effectiveness in a particular case or two, and then practically sell it to either national government or private company to try to actually implement the concept. So we're in a scientific research project now, which has these 5 phases. First one is literature review of best practices of nature-based solution to water waste. So we went from air to water now. Develop an inventory of mines in Central Asia. There's already a good inventory that was done by the UNECE, and so we used that and we just scaled it down a bit, and then we selected 2 sites where we want to actually, which have transboundary impact, where we want to actually go to the field site, collect data, and then to develop another design or concept as a practical nature-based solution to water waste in 2 different locations. One is in Kyrgyzstan, another one is in Kazakhstan. And then finally, to basically have an international conference to try to sell this idea internationally. Next slide. And so here you can see basically, I won't go through it. I'm happy to share it with everyone in detail. We have it in English, also in Russian language. This is basically the review of these nature-based solutions worldwide with practical examples from all over the world, basically. And so we kind of split it. It's like a literature review, right? And so we split it into different components. So there's different closure methods that can be nature-based for dry covers, wet covers. We have nature-based solutions for increasing pH, nature-based solutions for the removing of heavy metals through filtration systems, nature-based solutions to remove phosphorus, such as phosphorus filters, and then nature-based solutions through phytoremediation for soil and water contamination, phytostabilization, phytoextraction, and bioremediation using fungi and bacteria. Next slide.
Sorry to interrupt. Could you finalize, please, in not more than 2 minutes?
Exactly. That's all I need. Thank you very much. So basically, and I would like to ask of anybody who has access to these 2 sites that I'm talking about here. So we have one Aktuz settlement in Kyrgyzstan. It's a tailing that we want to go and to do research. Potentially another one in Ivanovka, which is also in Kyrgyzstan, and another one which is Ar-Ubela in Kazakhstan. And right now our team from the Netherlands and also from England and Kazakhstan want to go in the spring to these sites to do field data collection before we do these nature-based concept designs, and we need permission to go to these sites. So if anybody has contacts in Kyrgyzstan or in Kazakhstan who can help with that, it'd be very much appreciated. Next slide. So we're going to collect this. We're going to do this international conference after we do the designs in order to try to sell them. And next slide. Just final slide here. So this is related to the concept of the entire meeting here is, well, how can this be useful for international, let's say, catastrophes linked with the breakage of tailings? And we can use that as a concept, for instance, with how water flows. You know, riparian vegetation slows and spreads the flow of pollution, right? Or let's say different types of phosphates that are used in the agricultural sector. Floodplains and wetlands store floodwaters. Vegetation in rivers slows water velocity. So this is just kind of food for thought, is that these types of projects, you know, nature-based projects, can be done as a form of mitigation, remediation, but also you could think about how this could be a low-cost solution to, it might not be a solution, let's say, but let's say to mitigate the degree of the impact of such big catastrophes, which could potentially happen, is to set up a low-cost kind of nature-based system of different types of vegetation that could potentially help slow the impact of these major disasters that could happen with tailings. Final slide. Future work, we want to commercialize this. And then one final food for thought is how can these ideas of nature-based solutions be integrated into national legislation in the UNECE region. I mean, this is a very important topic, and it could, having, let's say, a good regulatory framework can also incentivize companies to be engaged in contracting research institutes like ourselves or practical companies to try to integrate these nature-based solutions. And you can create some incentives, regulatory incentives, or also opposite carrots for companies to try to invest in these low-cost nature-based solutions. So if you want to contact me, final slide with my contact information, I believe. No, it's not. Okay. So that might have been taken out last minute. Feel free to contact me. I give full opportunity for the UNECE to share my email with any of you and any of the points that I talked about, and look forward to fruitful collaboration. Thank you very much. The work you're doing is very important, and there's a lot of opportunities to help develop and improve on this sector. Thank you.